Hey, today we will take you to the era of ancient Persia, where betrayal had no escape and pride was punished with pain so twisted it became legend. It was 401 BCE. The Golden Empire of Persia was trembling. Two royal brothers, Artaxerxes II and Cyrus the Younger, had turned the empire into a battlefield. One fought for power, the other for revenge, and trapped between their ambitions stood a soldier named Mithridates, a loyal warrior, a killer of kings, and soon the victim of Scaphism, the slowest, most horrifying execution ever recorded in human history. He did not die by sword, he was not burned, he was not hanged, he was fed to insects. For 17 nights his flesh was devoured, piece by piece, while his mind remained awake, rotting slowly under the Persian sun. But why? Because he spoke, because he boasted, and in the empire of kings, the truth was whatever the throne said it was. This is not just the story of a death, it is the story of how history punishes those who speak when they shouldn't. This is the cursed tale of Mithridates. The battlefield of Cunaxa was still soaked in royal blood. The rebellion had failed. As the sun set behind the Mesopotamian dust, the corpses of 10,000 fallen warriors lay across the river plain, silent witnesses to a civil war that had torn the Persian Empire in half. Amid this wasteland of shattered armor and broken spears stood a single soldier, Mithridates. His javelin still dripped, his breathing was heavy, and before him lay the body of Prince Cyrus the Younger, the would-be usurper who had dared raise arms against his own brother, King Artaxerxes II. Mithridates had killed a prince. He thought he had saved the empire. He thought he had become a hero. He thought wrong. 3 days later, as fires burned in the royal camp and slaves scrubbed the blood from golden tents, Mithridates walked into the center of the court, uninvited, unaware, and full of pride. He raised his voice before the nobles, the generals, and even royal scribes. I was the one. My spear pierced his heart. I killed Cyrus, and I offer his death to the king. There was no applause, no reward, no acknowledgement, only the quiet snapping of quills and the chill of shifting eyes, because Mithridates had just contradicted the king's lie. According to the Greek historian Plutarch, in his work Life of Artaxerxes, the Persian king claimed he himself had killed Cyrus during the chaos of the battle. This version of events was written into court records and recited by royal messengers across the empire. However, alternative accounts, like those of Ctesias, a physician in the Persian court, and mentions by Xenophon in Anabasis, suggest that Cyrus was killed by a common soldier, possibly Mithridates, who was later punished for challenging the official version. This historical contradiction forms the core tension of the story: truth versus royal narrative. That night, Mithridates disappeared. He was not seen in the royal feast. His tent lay collapsed. His weapons were gone. The next morning, the guards whispered that he had been taken, far from the capital, far from the battlefield, to a place that had no name, only a method, a punishment older than language, reserved not for traitors, but for those who spoke the wrong truth. Scaphism. The empire would never record his trial. There would be no scroll, no witness, only the slowest death ever devised, kept alive by milk, honey, and rot. They stripped him in silence, not in rage, not in chaos, but in silence, like a ritual no one dared interrupt. Mithridates was carried to a marsh at the edge of a sun-scorched river. The reeds whispered like ghosts, insects buzzed in the still heat. And at the center of it all lay the thing, 2 narrow wooden boats hollowed from ancient cedar, carved not for travel, but for torment. He was laid into one, naked, shackled, his limbs forced apart. The second boat was then lowered over him, trapping him between 2 hulls, only his head, hands and feet exposed to the world. The guards said nothing. The priest only recited names of forgotten gods. And then came the milk, warm, rancid, forced into his throat, gallon after gallon, until his stomach bloated, his breath choked, and bile slipped from his lips. Then the honey. It was smeared over his face, rubbed into his eyes, poured onto his skin, into his ears, along his groin. He became a feast. And when the flies came, the dying truly began. The execution method known as Scaphism is described in detail by Plutarch in Life of Artaxerxes. It was allegedly used only once in history, against Mithridates, as punishment for killing Cyrus the Younger and then boasting publicly. Plutarch writes, "They set the man in a narrow boat, fed him with honey and milk until he was sick, then covered him in the same. Insects bred inside him, and he lived 17 days in torment." Plutarch lives, Artaxerxes, section 16. Modern historians debate the authenticity of this account, suggesting it may have been propaganda or symbolic exaggeration. But no other execution method in ancient records matches this level of detail and cruelty. This makes Scaphism one of the most horrifying punishments ever recorded. The first night was bearable. His body burned from the sun, his skin itched, but his mind held on. He whispered to himself, "They'll come for me. Surely the king will hear." By the third day he no longer prayed. The milk forced into him had begun to rot. His own body became a nest. Worms bred in the folds of his skin. Flies laid eggs in his open mouth. Ants crawled beneath his eyelids. Every movement sent 1,000 tiny jaws digging into him. But worst of all, he was conscious. The honey kept him alive. The milk kept him bloated. And every morning, guards came and fed him more, not to nourish, to prolong, not to kill, to harvest pain. By the 5th day, Mithridates stopped feeling human. His name, his memories, even his sense of time began to unravel, like threads pulled from a dying tapestry. The sun above no longer felt like fire. It felt like a god watching him suffer, mocking him. The wounds on his legs had turned black. His wrists, still visible through the wooden slit, were chewed raw. Foul green pus oozed from dozens of insect bites. His fingers no longer moved. But what broke him wasn't the rot. It was the whispers. He began to hear voices in the reeds. Whispers of Cyrus, laughing, his dead prince calling to him, "You killed me, little man. Now they kill you slowly." He cried out for mercy, but no one answered. His lips cracked open. His tongue was swollen, dry, and coated in a thick white film from the spoiled milk. And yet, every day they returned, with more milk, more honey, more silence. He hallucinated birds peeling the sky, rivers turning red, and the voice of his own mother cursing his birth. By the 7th day, his screams no longer formed words. They were just animal sounds. Greek accounts of Scaphism claim the victim remained conscious for days, a unique element compared to other ancient executions. Plutarch, in Life of Artaxerxes, reports that Mithridates survived for 17 days, a horrifyingly long time because of the nourishment deliberately given to prolong pain. Some historians believe this was intended not just to punish, but to terrify political enemies into silence. Moreover, the technique of sustaining life during torture appears again in Roman history, most notably in the writings of Suetonius, where Emperor Domitian allegedly used similar slow death methods to send political messages. This supports the theory that Scaphism was as much a tool of terror as it was of punishment. The guards no longer looked him in the eyes. Even they had grown uncomfortable. They brought food quickly, looking away as if ashamed of what their empire had become. By day 10, the water around the boat began to change color. Thick, dark, blood mixed with feces. His body was becoming a floating grave, and still he breathed. His mind now belonged to the swamp. He imagined gods speaking from the mud. He begged for death. He cursed the king, the empire, even the stars. But Scaphism offered no exit. The goal was not execution, it was erasure. To turn a man into a lesson. Word of Mithridates' punishment had spread, but not his crime. Villagers whispered of a man who fed the insects. Soldiers spoke of a traitor drowned in his own filth. And nobles, seated in ivory halls, sipped wine and said nothing. The empire had learned to obey fear. On the 12th day, Mithridates was no longer screaming. He couldn't. His jaw hung slack, dislocated from convulsions. His throat was crusted with dried milk and blood. His eyes, once filled with fire, were now fogged over, half blind. And yet, his heart still beat. The guards had set up a low fence of bronze stakes around the marsh to keep animals out and people in, because now his body had become a warning. Delegates, scribes, generals, even foreign envoys were brought to witness the consequence of pride. They walked in silence around the swamp, watched his body twitch, and left with heads bowed. No one spoke, no one questioned, no one dared. Scaphism wasn't just execution, it was public messaging. Greek historians like Plutarch suggest Mithridates was kept alive not merely for cruelty, but for spectacle. The slow death was designed for an audience, so others would never challenge royal authority. While Persian records on Scaphism are absent, likely purged or silenced, Greek political literature of the time shows a pattern. Torture wasn't private, it was displayed to terrorize. This strategy parallels Roman crucifixions and Assyrian skinning rituals, which were used as mass deterrents, not just punishments. In Mithridates' case, the lesson was simple. Do not speak against the throne, or you will feed the swamp. One morning, a young boy was brought forward. His father was a noble scribe. They pointed at Mithridates and said, "This is what happens to men who forget their place." The boy looked once and fainted. His father did not help him. He only watched, trembling. Even among the elite, fear had replaced honor. And Mithridates, his soul had likely left. What remained was a body, a billboard of pain, placed there by a king who would never speak his name again. But the swamp remembered, the insects remembered, and history, written not by kings but by whispers, remembered too. The sun rose for the 17th time. It didn't rise for Mithridates. His eyes had been pecked open by flies. His tongue, now black, dangled like leather. His arms, once strong and proud, had shriveled into sticks, bones wrapped in blistered meat. But still, he breathed, barely. From his chest came a gurgling wheeze, like the last wind through a ruined temple. His body, long since drowned in filth and infection, was now a canvas of living decay. A single maggot slid from his nostril. The guards didn't approach him that morning. They stood at a distance. Even their silence had changed. Before they feared disobedience, now they feared what he had become. His mind was gone. His body was a nest of death. And the swamp around him had started to move, not with water, but with life, worms, flies, beetles, ants, all born of his suffering. He was no longer a man, he was a habitat. Plutarch, in Life of Artaxerxes, confirms that Mithridates survived for 17 full days under Scaphism. No other recorded execution in antiquity reports such a prolonged, conscious state of decomposition. He writes, "Even as worms crawled from his wounds, he still drew breath. For 17 days they watched him rot alive, until death finally claimed what shame could not." This level of endurance has led some historians to believe narcotics or mild sedatives may have been used to keep the body alive while dulling full consciousness, a common Persian technique in ritual sacrifice and ancient punishments. The length of survival was not accidental, it was engineered. The wind changed that night. For the first time in weeks, the air turned cool. The reeds fell still, and a hush spread across the swamp, as if the earth itself had paused to watch. Then he stopped breathing. No scream, no twitch, no gasp, just stillness. Mithridates had finally died, but the horror didn't end. The boats, soaked in his blood and filth, were left untouched for days. No one dared move them. Birds circled above but didn't land. Even scavengers refused to feast. His body had become too unnatural, even for the creatures it fed. And so he lay, a forgotten hero, a nameless lesson, a corpse remembered only by rot. His name was erased from the scrolls, his body never buried. No monument, no mourning, no prayer. Mithridates, the man who once stood proud with a javelin in hand, who killed a prince to protect the empire, was now a ghost in forgotten reeds. But legends do not die in silence. They rot into whispers. In the years that followed, the empire of Persia shifted. Kings rose and fell, cities burned and were rebuilt. But in the corners of wine halls and the fire-lit tents of soldiers, his tale lingered. Do you know the man who fed the flies? He spoke too loudly, and they fed him to the swamp. And in each telling, the story twisted. Some said he was a traitor, others a hero. Some claimed he never existed at all. But the method, that remained. Scaphism became legend, a punishment so vile that even empires feared to use it again. And Mithridates, he became the first and last man to endure it. The only detailed source on Scaphism is from Plutarch's Life of Artaxerxes, written centuries after the event. No Persian texts confirm it. This has led modern historians to suggest the tale may have been Greek propaganda to vilify Persian kings, or a true event covered up by the Persian elite scholar James Morwood in The Greek World, 479 to 323 BC, argues that Scaphism reflects Greek fascination with barbarian cruelty, more than historical accuracy. However, historian Jonah Lendering notes that Greek court doctors, like Ctesias, who lived in Persia, did record details that align with the Mithridates legend. So what's the truth? Was Scaphism real? Or was it the invention of a world desperate to explain how far power will go to protect itself? In the end, Mithridates did not die because he killed a prince. He died because he spoke before the king did. His death was not justice. It was a message carved in flesh. He reminds us that in tyrannical empires, truth is not destroyed with swords. It's buried alive. And the worst tortures are not the ones we see, but the ones the powerful try to erase.